It is appropriate that Terry Donahue is addressing the topic, "You don't have to be a super talent to be a superstar." Terry was a walk-on throughout his playing career and even at the start of his coaching career. After high school, Terry played freshman football at San Jose State, but then returned home and attended a junior college where he did not play football. He then enrolled at UCLA and was a walk-on in football. He was redshirted in 1964, but then earned a starting spot at defensive tackle, although he weighed only about 200 pounds. He held the starting spot for the Bruins for 2 seasons, while the team compiled a record of 17 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie, including the remarkable 14-12 upset of unbeaten Michigan State in the 1966 Rose Bowl. Terry started all 21 games in that span. After graduation, he contacted Pepper Rogers, a former UCLA assistant who was at the time the head coach at Kansas. Terry offered to walk on as an assistant coach, offering to work for nothing if Rogers would simply give him a chance to become a coach. Pepper gave him the chance, and that was all that Terry needed. Now concluding his 10th season at his alma mater, Donahue has been at his best during the decade of the 1980s. In 6 seasons, he has led UCLA to a record of 50 wins, 16 losses, and 4 ties, including 5 consecutive bowl games, and he has won 8 or more games 4 seasons. A list of Donahue's most impressive achievements include 4 consecutive New Year's Day bowl games, the 1983 Rose, 1984 Rose, 1985 Fiesta, and the 1986 Rose Bowl. UCLA is one of 2 schools in the nation to appear in a New Year's Day Bowl in each of the last 4 years, and the only school to win each of its last 3 bowl appearances. Terry's record is 80 wins, 31 losses, and 6 ties, giving him a winning percentage of over 70%. Terry has a 5-0 record in Rose Bowl games. He was victorious as a player in 1966 and as assistant coach in 1976. Then he won 3 consecutive games, 83, 84, and this year, 1986, in the Rose Bowl. It's interesting to me that UCLA had never won a Rose Bowl until Terry's victory as a player. I know you will enjoy and profit from Terry's belief that you don't have to be a super talent to be a superstar. Terry Donahue.
You know, the longer I'm in coaching, the more I'm convinced that a player or a person who is trying to be successful doesn't have to have super talent in order to be a superstar. Over the last 10 years, I've watched all kinds of young athletes enter college with high hopes, dreams, and expectations of stardom. Often those who are the most highly regarded or sought after, the most widely recruited or heralded, fail in their bid for success. They don't achieve. Invariably, year in and year out, there are members of our team who were not highly regarded or sought after, who were not widely recruited or heralded, that go on to attain superstar status. They win games and they set records. They achieve. These achievers, as I like to call them, seem to have several things in common. They usually start their careers on the bottom rung of the ladder. They're generally not the most gifted or talented members of the team, but they all seem to have a very high positive self-expectancy level. They believe in themselves, and they expect to win or succeed. And there's one more thing about these achievers that I've noticed, and that is they all seem to be driven by great desire. More than any other emotion, they possess great desire. In the fall of 1979, I had a young man from Tempe, Arizona come to UCLA to join our team. His name was Rick Neuheisel. He was one of these achievers, although I didn't recognize him at the time. He had led his team to the state high school championship, but no colleges, including ourselves, were interested in offering him a scholarship. He was slow and immobile, with an arm that really wasn't very strong, and although he was bright, he just didn't seem to have that super athletic ability or talent that colleges were looking for. But what he was an achiever. He spent his first 2 years at UCLA in relative obscurity down on our scout team. After his second season, he earned a scholarship in our program, but not because I ever really thought he was going to play, but because he had proved himself to be of value to the team by running our upcoming opponents' offenses. Finally, in his third and fourth years, he had worked himself up to the position of third-string quarterback. Can you imagine, after 4 years of struggling and striving, he was third-string quarterback? But you know, throughout this whole 4-year span, Rick had an unwavering belief in himself. He would continually talk to me about the fact that he could lead UCLA to a championship and that he was good enough to be a star quarterback if he was just given the chance or the opportunity. As Rick's fifth and final year rolled around, he found himself in the position of being the number 2 quarterback on the team with the possibility of getting some playing time. And as fate would have it, a season-ending injury to our number 1 quarterback forced us to go with Rick Neuheisel as the starter. After 4 games, our record was 0-3-1. We were in disarray and totally discouraged, but not Rick Neuheisel. This was the opportunity that he had waited 5 long years for. This was the chance that he wanted. In the 5th game of the year, he took our football team to its first victory, and then to another, and then to another, and finally to the championship game against the University of Washington, where Rick hit 25 of 27 passes for 287 yards in leading his team to the conference championship and the Rose Bowl bid. In fact, he hit 18 straight completions during the game. It was an NCAA record. It was the greatest single performance by a quarterback that I had ever witnessed at UCLA. And if that wasn't enough, in the Rose Bowl game, he led UCLA to a 45-9 victory over Illinois and won the most valuable player of the game award on national television in front of millions of people. That experience of working with Rick Neuheisel taught me the invaluable lesson about high achievers, people with a high degree of self-motivation, people without super talent who become superstars. You know, success to me seems to be dependent almost entirely on drive and persistence. Success is not reserved exclusively for those with all the natural talents or abilities, but the will to win and succeed springs from desire and a high degree of self-motivation. Behind every winner or successful person, there is a burning desire, an enthusiasm, a belief in oneself. There is an attitude of inner faith. This kind of positive self-motivation is what champions are made of. Great football teams are made up of ordinary football players who have an extraordinary amount of desire. They're self-motivated. They're self-driven. On our 1982 championship team, we had another player who proved that you could become a superstar without super talent. His name was Cormac Carney. He had 1 scholarship offer out of high school to attend the Air Force Academy. And following his freshman season, he transferred to UCLA. For us, he fast became a 3-year starter in our program, and although he wasn't particularly gifted or blessed with natural talent, he seemed to have a kind of an innate ability to get himself open and to catch the ball and to make good plays for the team. He was elusive, and he seemed to achieve more than his ability allowed him to. During the opening game of Cormac's senior season against Long Beach State University, we were involved in a tragic accident in which 3 players leaped high into the air to catch a ball, and all 3 came down in a heap. 2 of those players jumped to their feet immediately, but the 3rd player, by the name of Todd Hart from Long Beach State, lay motionless on the field. In an instant, he was taken from a young, vibrant athlete to a quadriplegic. Todd Hart was taken to the hospital, where he fought for his life. Every minute of every day of every week of every month, Todd struggled to stay alive. Long Beach State and UCLA both went on to finish their season, with UCLA winning the Pac-10 championship and the Rose Bowl game against Michigan. Cormac Carney, for his part, finished his year as the leading receiver in the history of UCLA. He received every award and recognition a player could hope for. He was even nominated for a Rhodes Scholarship, in spite of the fact that he never really possessed great athletic talent. But the greatest award that Cormac Carney was to receive was to be presented by the Long Beach Century Club, honoring the Male Athlete of the Year. It was to be presented in his hometown of Long Beach in front of 1,000 people, people who had watched him since his boyhood days, people who had seen him overcome the odds and achieve. The award was to be given to the male athlete who displayed the greatest amount of courage and competitiveness throughout his career. And as Cormac was called to the rostrum to accept his award, he stunned the packed audience by saying that he could not accept the award because his courage and his competitiveness were never really tested, not like Todd Hart's were being tested every day of his life as he struggled to walk again. So instead, he accepted the award on behalf of Todd Hart and presented it to his college coach. Cormac is now a Harvard Law student, and if I'm ever in need of a good lawyer, I know where to find one. He could achieve, he could win. He knew what it meant to be without super talent and yet become a superstar. But you know, there are Rick Neuheisels and Cormac Carneys all over this country participating in college athletics and other competitive endeavors. And what really sets them apart from the others is their ability to achieve success without an unusual amount of talent. Well, don't get me wrong, they have their talents and strengths, but what they have that the others don't is that special blend of desire and self-motivation that allows them to reach superstar status without superstar talent. These are the achievers. They're the ones that get it done when the game is on the line. And there is something else about achievers that help them succeed, and that is they're willing to compete. They're not afraid to get in and mix it up. Their egos are such that they can tolerate setbacks and keep coming back for more. The reason some people don't like to compete is because they fear failure. They're worried about what people will say or how they will look. That fear of failure is probably present in all of us to some degree, but that desire for or acceptance of competition must be present in order to achieve. Think about the story of the Apple computer. It supposedly was developed in a garage. Think about the possibilities of failure that existed for the Apple computer when placed side by side with IBM. Imagine trying to compete with IBM. That would be enough to scare almost anyone off, but not Apple. And you know the rest of the story. Today, the Apple computer is a multi-million-dollar business success. At UCLA, we are in a competitive market, extremely competitive. In this town, we have professional football, professional basketball and baseball. We have ice hockey and horse racing. We have numerous college football teams. We have every imaginable sporting attraction that there is, and they're all in competition with us at UCLA. The fear of failure is certainly present, but if you aren't willing to compete, you can't hope to achieve or even survive. You have to have a dream in order to make that dream come true. A lot of times, because of the fear of failure or negative thinking, we inhibit ourselves and we keep ourselves from being successful. When I first became the head football coach at UCLA, I was 31 years old, and at that time, there were many people in the coaching profession who felt that UCLA couldn't compete and win in Los Angeles. I may have been one of those individuals. I was not sure that we could win the conference championship and go to the Rose Bowl on a consistent basis. After all, UCLA was a basketball school, not a football school. Great players came to our school to play basketball and went somewhere else if they wanted to be on championship football teams and go to the Rose Bowl. I was feeling sorry for myself. Indirectly, I was affecting our success by dwelling on what we didn't have or couldn't control rather than dwelling on what we did have and could control. Let me repeat that. Indirectly, I was affecting our success by dwelling on what we didn't have or couldn't control rather than dwelling on what we did have or could control. We had tough academic standards, and we couldn't recruit many of the same players that other teams in the conference were recruiting. Our players were struggling academically, and this was affecting our athletic performance. We had poor, outdated facilities, at least 10 years behind the times. There was constant turnover on our coaching staff, and as a result, we lacked continuity. We didn't even have an on-campus football stadium. There were only 2 or 3 teams in the whole country that didn't at least have an on-campus stadium. And most important of all, we were unable to win the big games when the championship was on the line. But I was spending more time worrying about the things we didn't have rather than worrying about the things we did have. There's no question in my mind that as soon as I stopped doing that, we started doing better. We began to dwell on the things we did have and could control. We started a program to promote our academic excellence, to use it to our advantage rather than our disadvantage. We improved our academic counseling and increased our tutorial budget so that the players began experiencing more academic success. We expanded our recruiting base so as to cover the entire United States instead of just California. In this way, we increased the pool of good players who were academically qualified to be recruited by UCLA. We instituted a major building program to update our facilities, making them as complete and modern as anywhere in the country. We began paying our assistant coaches better, which helped us maintain the continuity on our staff. We even moved the site of our home football games to the Rose Bowl, making it our own home field and giving our alumni, boosters, and friends a place to socialize and picnic before the games. This gave us our own identity as a football team. And most important of all, we began winning the big games. We started dwelling on the things we could influence. During the 1980s, UCLA is the only football team in the country to have won 4 straight New Year's Day games and 3 Rose Bowls. I am sure there are a lot of reasons for this kind of success, but one of the primary ones is that we began eliminating the fear of failure. We began to compete more aggressively and to concentrate on what we could affect and could control rather than on the things we had no control of. But you know, in looking back over the last 10 years, and not just the 1980s, I am totally convinced that when it comes to running a football program, that there are 3 essential ingredients that spell success. The first is a supportive administration. In my business, as in most businesses, you must have the support of the administration in order to succeed. You must be working with and for people who want to win, who are committed to doing the right things, and who understand what your problems are and are willing to help you solve them. In the example that I cited earlier, if the administration at UCLA wasn't committed to winning and being the best, then I am sure we would have been told that there was not enough money to improve counseling or tutoring. Our facilities would not have been improved as dramatically as they had been, and our recruiting budget wouldn't have been expanded. We certainly wouldn't have made such a bold move like moving the site of our home games to the Rose Bowl. All of these decisions were met with problems and criticisms, and it wasn't easy to make any of them. However, I am sure that without such administrative support, our football fortunes would not have turned around as they did. I know that the world of business is the same as the world of athletics. It takes a strong administrative arm to get the program running properly. Offices must be set up correctly. There must be adequate support help. An administrative chain of command must be established, and things must run smoothly and efficiently in order to succeed. But above all these other factors, there must be a spirit of cooperation and commitment on the part of the decision-making administration. The second essential ingredient that must be present is technical knowledge. Often in my profession, I marvel at the ingenious offensive and defensive designs that are devised by bright, imaginative coaches. Technical knowledge is not automatically present. It must be acquired. It must be learned. So often it comes from experience and years on the job. Every year when a new football season approaches, we spend hours upon hours trying to advance our technical knowledge of the game of football. Our coaching staff goes and studies at different universities to try and find out how they are doing things and what methods they are employing to solve various problems. Other coaching staffs throughout the country come to our campus to study and to look at the UCLA method. So often in these kinds of exchanges, if we can get just one good idea, one thing that can advance our system or program, it can make the difference between winning and losing. In any business, there are new and exciting ideas every year that are technically sound and progressive. The business that stands still, the business that fails to stay abreast of these new trends, is the business that will fall behind. I think the greatest current example of this in football is the so-called new defensive design popularized by Buddy Ryan of the Chicago Bears, the Super Bowl champions. Buddy Ryan took aspects of various defenses that he had learned and that had been used for years that were technically sound, added a few new ideas and dimensions of his own, and instituted them with some good personnel. Together, this combination produced one of the most dominant defensive teams in the history of the National Football League. In terms of technical knowledge, he was at the top of his field, and as a result of all this, he has just recently been promoted to the head coaching position with the Philadelphia Eagles. He moved up in his profession. People throughout the world of football are studying with Buddy Ryan and copying his ideas. He had technical knowledge. The third essential ingredient, in addition to administrative support and technical knowledge that must be present in order to achieve success, is personnel. John Wooden, undoubtedly one of the greatest coaches of any sport who ever lived, used to say that no coach can win without players. Not every coach can win with players, but no coach can win without him. What he was talking about, obviously, was personnel. What John Wooden was saying was you better have the players. The proper selection, placement, and evaluation of that personnel are all important and essential ingredients in making sure that you are getting the most out of what you have. Personnel is the single most important aspect of a football team, and I am sure the same thing must be true of other businesses. When we had the two greatest safety men in the history of UCLA, Ken Easley and Donnie Rogers, we were able to play certain defenses that no one else in our league could play. We were able to experiment or gamble, and we knew that the innate athletic talents of those types of talented players would compensate for any mistakes in design that we might have made. We used to design plays on the blackboard, and those plays looked quite different when the great Freeman McNeil, Wendell Tyler, or Kevin Nelson were running them as opposed to someone of lesser talent. Our passing game worked with perfection when Tom Ramsey and Jay Schrader, Steve Bono, and David Norrie were throwing the ball to the likes of Jojo Tonzell, Mike Sherrard, and Paul Bergman. And the same thing is true for other businesses. Look at the Chrysler Corporation. No one in the history of American business has done a better job than Lee Iacocca and the management team that he has put together. He was the right man for the right job, and he picked the right personnel for his team. A lot of people claim that the secret of Al Davis's success with the Los Angeles Raiders is personnel. He knows how to evaluate coaches and players. He can tell when a player is at the end of his career or when he has a few more seasons left. He's able to determine which players have potential that will eventually be reached and which players just have potential. Obviously, the selection, placement, and evaluation of personnel is at the heart of his successful program. For me, it's hard to envision success of any magnitude without any of the three key ingredients of administrative commitment, technical knowledge of the product, and the proper evaluation of personnel. I believe these three qualities are at the very heart of all successful programs. There are always many factors that go into blending successful programs, but none more important than these three.